Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name's Ken Gee. I am the founder and managing member of KRI Partners. I am thrilled to be here today to talk to you about our Jacksonville turnaround story. It's a recent value add project we just did in Jacksonville, Florida, and I hope you find it interesting. This video is going to be a pretty in-depth look at what we did, how we did it, and why we did it. But if you stick around to the end, I promise to share with you some important lessons that we learned on this project and some important lessons that we have learned over the years that continue to remind us of their importance. After every deal, I do like to reflect on what happened, what we did right, what we could have done better. And that's exactly what I want to share with you at the end of this video. So hopefully you're able to stick around to the end. All right, let me give you some background on the deal. First of all, the property is located on the south side of Jacksonville. It's comprised of 104 units. It was built in 1990, so not too old. It's a sprawling property, comprised of about 13 buildings, a clubhouse, and an amenity package. That's a really nice mix of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Some of the financial facts: we bought the property in 2017. We paid $7.6 million. We assumed a CMBS loan to buy the property. We raised about $3.7 million in equity to do the deal. That equity was used to obviously acquire the property, but also to make the improvements to the property. We spent about $850,000 on renovation costs. Those were hard costs, probably another $100,000 to $200,000 more in soft costs, but a fairly sizable renovation. We sold the property in 2021 for a little over $13 million. All right, so why did we buy this property? When I show you the pictures, you're gonna see that this is a tough property. Most people would have just walked away from it. But here's what we liked about it. First of all, it was in a wonderful neighborhood. Very nice residential development right behind the property. The property had a lake. There was tons of employment around the property within 2 to 3 miles in the Bay Meadows area. If you know Jacksonville, there's a ton of employment in that area. Not too far from St. John's Town Center and only a couple of miles from the avenues. Huge retail areas in Jacksonville. The property itself had tons of character. I love the residential feel. I love the fact that there was a lake and large backyards for people to have some outside time. We always look for properties that are not well managed and need some maintenance or improvements to make them nicer. This property certainly checked those boxes. It was terribly mismanaged in lots of different ways, and it had a ton of deferred maintenance. So it was right up our alley. That's why we love to have this property. Now I can tell you that it's a struggling property, or I can show you. So let me try to walk you through what I saw when I first toured this property. This was my welcome to the property. As I walked into the leasing office, notice the roof above the doors. Well, it was partially missing. Certainly not exactly a way to impress a prospect. As I walked into the clubhouse, I saw inventory and things stacked everywhere. It was terrible. As you can see, the furniture wasn't exactly up to date, and nor was the decorating. When I stepped outside to the pool, which should have been an awesome amenity package, as you can see, it wasn't well maintained at all. In fact, it had been closed for about a year. As I walked around the property, I noticed the buildings really didn't have much pop to them. They were just all painted basically the same color. There was, however, this fishing lake that I thought was really nice, and it bordered a number of the buildings on the property. Inside the apartments, now in this video, we're going to talk mostly about exterior and amenity improvements because that's really what the play was here. In every apartment, we had some similar deferred maintenance. So each apartment turn was really what I would call a hard turn. We had lots of mismatched appliances and countertops that needed help and things like that. So we certainly did plan to turn each unit and make the units inside nice. We just simply didn't focus on the interiors for this project. We also had 2 units that were just down. They were used as storerooms and basically had all the parts that you could steal out of an apartment used to fix other apartments. Okay, let's get to the renovations. Hopefully these pictures will give you a pretty good feel for just how big a job this was. We did a few things at the same time, but let me start with the roofs. All the roofs on every building needed to be replaced. As you can see, a property this size required some pretty heavy equipment to remove the roofing materials and so on. All the roofs were clay tile, so what you see is just tens of thousands of pounds of clay tile that we had to have removed from the property. We also replaced probably 200 to 300 pieces of plywood decking that was underneath this clay tile. Continuing on with the major repairs, we had to repair about 17 of the different stairways. That included some welding, some concrete steps, and new brackets that held these steps to the building. Certainly no small project. Then came the fun part. Obviously, a big part of changing the character of this property was the color. So we got to have fun with the decorators, trying to figure out what colors would go with what in this residential setting. What you see here is what we ended up with. We felt pretty good about what we did. Something most people don't pay much attention to, but it's actually pretty laborious to fix, is the apartment doors. We believe that we want to control the feeling that someone has all the way up until they get to their apartment. And as you can see in the pictures, simply repainting the doors, replacing the numbers and the door knockers had an enormous impact with how someone felt as they were walking into their apartment. The next big exterior project, you really wouldn't think it to be a project at all, but it had to do with getting rid of the trash that 104 different units created. When we bought the property, there was one trash receptacle basically in the middle of the property, and everybody used that trash receptacle. So many problems with that. The first was it wasn't large enough. Secondly, it happened to be located on the main drive, so every time you drove the property, you could see all this trash strewn everywhere. It had no place for bulk furniture, and some of the folks who lived in the buildings further away from this trash receptacle had to carry their trash a very long way. It was a major, major eyesore. So we had to actually re-engineer the way that trash was dealt with at this property. We did that through building what I call dumpster corrals and doing them in several locations throughout the property so people didn't have to walk far away. And it also removed all of the eyesore from the main drive of the property. So although something as simple as trash seems like you really shouldn't be thinking about it much, actually had an enormous impact on how the property looked. The last thing we did on the general exteriors was the landscaping. A number of pictures here shows just the theme of the landscaping was just not well kept in any way, shape, or form. And so when we do landscaping around buildings on large properties, our rules here are neat and clean. So that's what you'll see here that we did throughout the buildings. You will see later what we did around the leasing office and Clubhouse. We generally go a little more in depth there, but certainly neat and clean and mulched. Dark brown mulch really made this property look so much better. You already know what the inside of the Clubhouse looked like. I'll just share with you this other photo that was the cabinets that were in the breakfast bar. We ended up not having to spend a lot of money on those cabinets. All we had to do was reface them. And as you can see, we had a nice sink, a gooseneck faucet, we had a granite countertops, and then of course painted, decorated, and as you can see, the Clubhouse looked considerably different after we were done than before we started. One of the biggest challenges inside this Clubhouse was the lighting. As you can see, there were all sorts of lighting fixtures just plastered to the ceilings. Looked pretty ridiculous, actually. So one of the challenges we had was trying to figure out how, with so many different ceiling types within one building and one open space, to how to deal with the lighting. So we were able to do that with a combination of recessed cans and some pendant lighting over the bar area. We also moved the office. We did this to create a nice business center. What you're looking at is what was a storeroom off to the side. When we were done, it became a very nice, very comfortable leasing office. Then we tackled the fitness center. As you've probably heard me say many times, we care a lot about our amenity package. And this used to be a storeroom. It was once a fitness center, but apparently the previous owner didn't want to leave it as a fitness center, so they just used it, allowed the manager to store her extra furniture. We obviously cleaned that out, painted it, carpeted it, put in new lighting, and turned it into a fitness center that overlooked the pool area. and was a huge hit with the residents, no question about that. So in keeping with my belief that the amenity package a property offers is really important to the leasing process, we turned our attention to the clubhouse and the pool area. So as you can see, I think I showed you earlier, the pool wasn't exactly well kept. So we drained the pool, resurfaced it. We resurfaced the entire decking with pavers. We took that white fence and we painted it a dark green. There was nothing wrong with the fence structurally, but it looked terrible because it was painted a white color. It hadn't been painted in a long time. And quite honestly, I didn't want people to notice the fence. I wanted people to notice the pavers, the pool furniture, the outdoor kitchen. So as you likely know, when you paint something a darker color, it tends to fade away and people don't notice it as much. And that's what we did for this fencing and some of the other things nearby the pool so that it didn't detract from how nice the pool area looked. We also added an outdoor kitchen with a propane tank and a timer for safety. People absolutely love to be able to cook their food right there and eat by the pool. We also had a beautiful, enormous lanai on this clubhouse that we had to figure out what to do with. So of course we paved it along with the rest of the deck. We improved some drainage, but we also added some wicker furniture, an outdoor TV, and just made it a little place for people to hang out and relax. It became so nice that we actually had someone have a baby shower there. It was that inviting. So our amenity package, when we were done, became a place where the family could go. You know, the kids could be in the pool, having fun. Mom and dad can watch the football game on the outdoor TV, cook lunch or dinner on the outdoor grill. They could take turns working out in the fitness center, which is located right in the clubhouse. And it really became a place for the family to spend the day and really enjoy themselves right at their own home. One note about pool maintenance here, you'll see a picture here that showed a pool bot. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but in Florida, one of the biggest challenges we have with pools is that there's always oak trees around everywhere, and those oak trees drop little leaves. So it becomes a very laborious task to try to keep your pool clean. So what we did was we bought a pool bot, commercial grade, with a large basket. So rather than paying a maintenance guy a couple hours a day, every day, to clean this pool, we ended up buying the pool bot. We drop it in the pool. 2 hours later, we take it out of the pool, empty it out, and our pool's clean. So this allowed us to clean our pool every single day, keep it really nice, and it didn't cost a lot of money after the initial investment for the pool bot. We then tackled the outside of the clubhouse area. The landscaping clearly, was pretty much non-existent around that pool area. And so what we did was removed all the overgrowth, replanted some nice plants that were appropriate for the space, added flowers, mulched, and we took what was a pretty uninviting entrance and made it really nice looking. One last thing that most people don't pay attention to, it's the signage on the property. I think I had mentioned earlier that the previous owner liked blue signs for some reason. I think they thought that they would draw someone's attention. Not our style, so we ended up replacing the signs with up-to-date signs on nice 4x4 posts, and it really made the outside of the property look so much nicer. Okay, so here's some of the after pics that were taken right before the property was sold. I'll let you take a look at those while I just share some important data points here on this project. So the renovation took us about 18 months. During the time that we owned the property, which was about 44 months, we were able to move rents from an average of about $750 to an average of about $9.25 when we sold the property. Quite a change for 44 months. We listed the property with a national brokerage firm. After a 30 to 45 day listing period, we received 27 offers on the property, which allowed us to sell the property for a little over $13 million. That was enough to give our investors an annual return on their investment of a little over 22%. Internal rate of return turned out to be just under 19%. The reason for that difference is the time value of money. If you understand the difference between those two calculations, you know exactly what I mean. An equity multiple of a little over 1.8x. That means that if you invested $100,000 into this project, you got a little more than $180,000 back over the life of the project. So not a bad return over 44 months. A little bit about KRI, just by background. We've been in business for about 23 years. Our senior management team's managed about 15,000 units. We've invested so far in about 15 deals, most of them just like this deal in terms of a value add business plan. Historically, our investors in most of our projects have earned 15, 20, even 30% plus annual returns on their investment. So we're pretty proud of that. So I have a question for you, and that is, are you ready to start building massive wealth for yourself? If you are, then consider an investment with KRI in one of our future deals. So if you are ready to invest with us, here's how you get a hold of us. Just shoot me an email, give us a call, or go to our website at www.kripartners.com. You'll get all the information that you need to look at an investment with us. Okay, I promised you previously, if you were still with me to the end, we would talk for a minute about some of the lessons that we learned and were able to confirm with this project. I think I shared earlier, I always like to reflect on a project after we're done, kind of get a feel for what went right, what we could have done better. The first is, we were able to confirm this lesson we learned a long time ago. You just cannot plan for everything when you start on these projects. You have to be able to adjust on the fly. That's why I always tell people, when you're considering an investment with an investment firm, please make sure they have experience. That experience is going to allow that investment team to make sure they make good decisions, because even the best laid plans are going to change as soon as the project starts. In our case, it was a hurricane that set us back 6 to 9 months and a number of small adjustments that we had to make along the way, but all critical and very important to the success of the project. Secondly, please make sure that your investment firm is reevaluating the business plan all the time. By this, I mean, when we go into the project, we've set our renovation plan and we know it's going to change. We just don't know exactly how. So as time goes on and you get into the renovation project, I strongly encourage you to constantly reevaluate the plan. That's important because as you learn more things, as you find certain small surprises, as the market changes, you're going to want to make changes as to what you do, when you do it, and how you do it. So nothing wrong with that. Just constantly reevaluate the plan and make sure that you're using your investors' capital as efficiently as possible. Last thing I'll share with you, and it really is more of an operational thing, and that is the issue of competition. People don't think, well, they think about competition, but they don't really give it a lot of thought. At least in my early days, I did not. This particular property is fairly unique in that I can probably hit a driver to 3 or 4 properties that compete with us in this neighborhood. That's a little unusual to have that dense of housing, but the south side of Jacksonville in this area is known for having a lot of nice apartment complexes and has continued to be a great place for people to live. Well, that competition has an impact on you and what you do in terms of your renovation plan and the speed in which you're able to raise rents. So make sure that you consider the competition, because when you're in a competitive market like that, in a very competitive little sub market, you need to make sure that your rents are in line with those around you relative to the quality of the various assets that the prospective renter is looking at. So very, very important. Seems obvious, but I can tell you on the way in, a lot of folks don't give that too much attention. And I would encourage you to make sure you understand that going in so that you can make better decisions about your pro formas. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this presentation. I hope that you have enjoyed our Jacksonville turnaround story. I know it was a little bit long, but there was a lot to do here. We're pretty proud of the outcome of the project. We think our investors are pretty thrilled with it. If you have any questions or comments, do me a favor, leave them in the comment section below this video. I will be happy to answer those personally. And again, if you like the content that we've shared here, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell. So thank you again and have a wonderful day.